So the book is called Not the Israel My Parents Promised Me, and it's by Harvey Pekar and myself. And Harvey Pekar, if you don't know, is kind of like the father of memoir comics, in the sense that in the late 70s, he created a book called American Splendor, and he became known for kind of telling comic book stories about his day-to-day life living in Cleveland. So he's not about fantastic superheroes and fantasy. It's about real people, well, in particular, this real man and the people that were in his world. And so then this book was one of the last books that he was working on before he passed away 2 years ago. And it was a book that really kind of pulled together a lot of the ideas that he had about his own Jewish identity, and trying to understand kind of how his position as just an American Jew fit into the larger Jewish community, and in particular the relationship between the Jewish people and the land of Israel. And so the book is basically made up of 3 stories. It's a story of Harvey and I traveling in Cleveland for the day, talking about making a book. So that's the meta part of the story. Then it's Harvey reminiscing about his life and how he changed his opinions about Israel and Jewish identity. And then the third part of the story is kind of like a historical survey through the eyes of Harvey Pekar of how the ideas of Israel and what the Promised Land has changed over the course of 2,000 plus years. So it's kind of these 3 tracks kind of put together into one story. I met Harvey in 2004 when I was promoting my first book, which was an adaptation of a biblical text into a comic book. So kind of Harvey immediately saw me as like a Jewish artist, which was good and bad. And from that we kind of built our relationship. Harvey was kind of like an intellectual Lothario, so to speak, where he had relationships with lots of different artists because he was working on so many different projects. So I imagine the dynamics were different with each person based on the scope of the project. So I was like his Jewish kind of sounding board. And I kind of started from there. And then I guess it was 2007, I pushed to him a small project that was a foreword to a book about the history of Jews in comics and kind of how various different Jewish men and women had contributed to the comic book industry. And he asked me to illustrate what he wrote. And it was a 4-page project that we did in 2007, and it was an opportunity for us to kind of cut our teeth in terms of figuring out our rapport with one another. And I guess he liked the process. So a couple months later, he called me up on Thanksgiving morning at 8 in the morning and was like, "Hey, JT, I have a book for you. You want to do it?" And so then it was a very kind of slow process of just kind of talking with him and the editor that he had been working with at Hill and Wang. And so for 2 years, all we did was just talk about the book and have different versions of the script, me kind of pushing back on certain ideas, and then Harvey rewriting stuff. And so we had basically 2 different versions of the script to kind of use as source material. And then we created the new script together starting in January of 2010. So that was really kind of how we worked together. We talked on the phone, excuse me, we talked on the phone predominantly. But in January of 2010, I flew out to Cleveland and hung out with Harvey for about 4 days. And the story that the book is now a condensed version of those 4 days into one day. So Harvey was a Luddite. He didn't use a computer. So everything was handwritten. And he would then photocopy those scripts and then send them to my publisher. The publisher would have an intern, transcribe them. They would then call Harvey to make sure that what they had typed up was what he had, intended, and then they would send it to me, and then I would then pick up the phone and then decode what I saw in the Word document with Harvey and break it down into actual pages and how much. Harvey didn't have a real good sense of the real estate on a page. In this, he would make, he'd be very wordy, and he didn't realize that all of these things couldn't really fit on one page if I was to draw anything, because it would just be text balloons, word balloons. So my job was to kind of, I was the editor, the pacing guy, the director, to kind of pull things apart, condense, stretch, figure out, is it a six panel page, or are we leading up to a big splash page because of the drama of the moment? And so that was really where he and I kind of worked together. Harvey gave very little creative direction in terms of draw this, do that. His scripts would sometimes have little like stick figures of what he wanted. In the book, whenever there's like two people kind of talking about something, like usually it's like people reading newspapers saying, oh, our country's really shaping up, or there's one scene where there's two men looking at images of Arafat in like in TV screens. Whenever there's two people commenting about the action that's happening, that is Harvey. That's the only direction he ever gave. Working with him was always great because he was so encouraging. Here I am working with a living legend at the time, and he never was stepping on my toes at all. Which for a young person in their career, it means a lot to have someone, basically say, do your thing. I have complete faith in what you're doing. So that was awesome. It was a blessing. I was really lucky. It's strange, it's sad, it's bittersweet. So I was just at San Diego Comic-Con, and I presented a panel called The Legacy of Harvey Pekar, and I was the only one on the panel. And that was for a variety of reasons. But now that I'm kind of a custodian, so to speak, of his legacy. And it's a huge responsibility. It's an honor, but it's sad. And it's hard talking about a friend of mine and a colleague with strangers who know of him as a personality, and everyone kind of feels they know him, and everyone does know him in a slightly different way. My relationship with him is different than some of the artists that he had been working with for longer than me, or for the same amount of time. He had parallel kind of conversations with a lot of people. But I do talk to his wife, Joyce, a lot. It's important to me that, so basically since he's passed, I've kind of created now a new relationship with her. And so that's been nice. Again, bittersweet. She has her own kind of stuff to deal with in terms of the legacy of Harvey. Right now she's working on raising the funds for a sculpture to commemorate him and comics and what comics can do to be installed in Cleveland. So that's going to be installed in October, so I'm going out for that. She and I will be speaking at a university together in Cleveland, so that'll be the first time we'll be able to kind of rap with each other. But then the way that I kind of pitch it, I try not to be like I'm the guy that's carrying the flag for Harvey Pekar, and try and make it more of, well, what was it like for me to work with Harvey Pekar? So the same way that Harvey kind of had my cancer years, like I'm kind of framing it as my Pekar years. But the reason I took this project was because I wanted to work with Harvey, and so the minute that he passed away, it became a totally different can of worms, a totally different project. And so it became more of a responsibility to fulfill what he wanted, and then to make him proud, and then, move on. He was always looking for the next project too. So the way that I kind of pitch it is more about, what was it like working with Harvey Pekar? How did we work together? And then kind of what's his legacy? How does it affect all these other comics that are out there now, and stories and narratives and kind of all that hullabaloo? But yeah, I do take it very seriously that I'm kind of one of the last people in the line that he worked with. So I don't want to mess it up.